On paper, this shouldn't work. San Diego International is the busiest single-runway commercial airport in the U.S. One runway, 663 acres, wedged between the bay, downtown, and a hillside. Last year, it handled more than 25 million passengers, and it's in the middle of a rebuild costing roughly $3.8 billion. And every night at 11:30, it becomes illegal to launch a single airplane from it. Not discouraged. Forbidden. 7 hours out of every 24, the busiest single runway on Earth is not permitted to send anything anywhere. And yet it keeps growing. There's a catch, though, and it's stranger than the rule itself. Airplanes land all night. Arrivals are completely unrestricted at any hour. Only leaving is banned, and nobody in San Diego can change that, even if everyone wanted to, because of a federal law passed in 1990. Start with what the rule costs, because it isn't abstract. A jet that pushes back at 11:29 goes. The same jet at 11:31 does not, and that isn't a delay, it's a cancellation with extra steps. Passengers come back off the aircraft. The crew runs out of legal duty time and has to be replaced or rested. The airplane, which was supposed to be in Chicago or Seattle by morning to start a full day of flying, is sitting in San Diego instead. One missed pushback doesn't break one flight. It breaks the next day's schedule for that entire aircraft. Multiply that across an airport this size, 230,000 aircraft movements a year on one runway, and 7 hours of every day are structurally unsellable. No airline can schedule a red eye out of San Diego, not a single one. The most valuable thing an airport owns is time on its runway, and San Diego voluntarily takes almost a third of it off the market every day. And here's where it gets stranger. Airplanes are still landing at 2 in the morning. The airport's own guidance says it stays open 24 hours. But with no departures overnight, the gate areas close down around 2 a.m., and passengers get moved out to the public side until security reopens near 4:15. So the airport is awake. It's just not allowed to let anything leave. That asymmetry is the whole key, and once you understand it, the rule stops sounding arbitrary. A departing aircraft and an arriving one are not the same noise event. On landing, engines are pulled back near idle, and the aircraft descends on a shallow, stable path. On takeoff, those same engines are at maximum thrust, hauling a fully fueled jet off the ground and climbing hard. The program manager for noise mitigation at the San Diego Airport Authority puts it plainly: planes taking off are far louder than planes landing. Now add San Diego's geography. Departures head west out over Point Loma and the beach communities, so the loud half of every flight passes directly over people's roofs at low altitude. And this rule was not written in a planning workshop. It was written under siege. By the mid-1970s, the Port Commission was facing noise claims and damage suits from more than 1,000 citizens, plus the city's school administration, totaling close to $125 million. When the first curfew was ordered, the airlines using the field and the Federal Aviation Administration all lined up against it, and airline officials warned it would inevitably be challenged in court. The commission called it the most restrictive noise abatement action taken by any metropolitan airport in the country, and it went ahead anyway. What emerged by 1976 was the rule that still stands. Ban the loud half. Takeoffs prohibited between 11:30 at night and 6:30 in the morning. Landings, the quiet half, left alone. As a piece of policy design, it's elegant. It targets exactly the thing causing the harm and leaves the rest running. And then the ground shifted underneath it in a way nobody in 1976 could have planned for. Because that curfew was written for the aircraft of 1976, and it is still, word for word, the rule today. Not because anyone thinks it's optimal, because touching it would destroy it. Call it the grandfather trap. And to see how San Diego fell into it, you have to look at what the city tried first. Because the obvious answer isn't a clock, it's a map. If the airport is too small, too loud, and hemmed in by a city, move it. Every San Diegan has had this thought. The airport authority spent 3 years and about $17 million having it professionally. The site they landed on was Miramar, the Marine Corps air station north of the city. Enormous, already an airfield, already surrounded by fewer homes. In November 2006, it went to county voters as Proposition A. It lost, not narrowly, 62% against 38% for, a 25-point margin, conceded before most precincts had reported. And this is the part that matters more than the vote itself. Miramar belongs to the Marine Corps, and the military has no intention of surrendering it. There is no other viable site in the county. One analysis after the vote noted that Lindbergh Field sits on barely 600 acres, far too constrained for the full long-haul and cargo operation a city that size would otherwise support, and that no alternative site was available. So the land answer didn't just fail. It closed, permanently, which meant the clock answer was the only answer left, and San Diego would have to live inside a rule it could no longer relocate its way out of. Then Washington locked the door behind it. On October 1st, 1990, the Airport Noise and Capacity Act took effect. The logic behind it was reasonable enough from a national perspective. If every city could impose its own curfew and noise limit, the national air network would fragment into hundreds of incompatible local rulebooks. So Congress made new local restrictions extraordinarily difficult to impose. In practice, almost nothing has cleared that bar since. Burbank tried for a nighttime curfew and the FAA rejected the application outright, but Congress also had to deal with the restrictions already in place, so it grandfathered them. Any rule in effect on October 1st, 1990 was exempt. San Diego's 1976 curfew was in effect. It survived. Now read the trap in the city's own words. San Diego's own noise guidance explains that the airport had a departure curfew in place before the act, that restrictions in effect on that date aren't subject to its requirements, and then adds the crucial line: a modification of an existing restriction would subject that restriction to the act and would most likely result in its elimination. Sit with that. The curfew is legally untouchable in exactly one condition: that nobody touches it. Change the hours to match modern aircraft, which are dramatically quieter than 1976 aircraft, and you forfeit the exemption. Loosen it by 15 minutes, and you lose the whole thing. Tighten it to please residents, same result. That's the grandfather trap. The rule can't be improved, only kept or lost. San Diego is operating a 1976 noise ordinance in 2026, not because it's the right rule, but because it's the only rule the city is allowed to have. The single most consequential regulation governing this airport is frozen, and the only key to it is a match, which would be a clean story if the rule were enforced. It isn't, and this is where it stops being tidy. Because a curfew is a law, and a law is only as real as what happens when you break it. The penalty structure looks serious on paper: $2,000 for a first violation, $6,000 for a second, $10,000 for a third. But airlines get a clean slate every 6 months, which resets everyone back to the bottom of the ladder twice a year. And a great many violations draw no fine at all. Between 2010 and mid-2015, airlines broke the curfew 217 times. A review panel fined them for 117 of those, about 54%, collecting $682,000. The three worst offenders were each penalized for fewer than half their violations. In the 6 years to 2022, 337 more violations, and again, less than half drew a fine. Nearly half the fines that were issued were the minimum $2,000. The offenders are not obscure. Across those 6 years, JetBlue accounted for 59 violations and American for 57, far ahead of anyone else. JetBlue has absorbed some large individual penalties too, including $30,000 for one flight that was delayed because the aircraft was overweight and had to dump fuel before it could go. So why does a violation so often cost nothing? The reason isn't corruption. It's something more uncomfortable. The panel reviews each case, and it routinely excuses violations caused by mechanical problems, weather, or air traffic delays on the grounds that the alternative is worse. The airport authority has been explicit that it doesn't want an airline choosing between beating a clock and fixing an aircraft, which is correct. Nobody wants a maintenance shortcut at 11:28. But the effect is a rule enforced roughly half the time, at prices a major airline treats as a rounding error. $2,000 against a transcontinental flight full of passengers isn't a deterrent. It's a FEE. And the numbers move with the industry, not with the law. Violations fell to 18 in 2020 when the world stopped flying, then 52 the next year, then 89 in 2022, a 70% jump in a single year as traffic came back. The curfew didn't change, the flying did, all of which raises the obvious question. If the rule can't be modernized and it's only half enforced anyway, why keep it at all? The honest answer has two parts, and neither is sentimental. The first is that the neighborhoods under that departure path are the reason this airport still exists downtown. San Diego International sits 3 miles from the city center, which is an extraordinary asset. That proximity survives on a bargain. The people underneath tolerate an airport in their sky, and in exchange, the noise stops at a fixed hour every night. Break that bargain, and you don't get a slightly noisier city. You get organized opposition to every expansion, every permit, every environmental review, from residents who have already proven at the ballot box that they'll vote on this issue. The second reason is quieter, and it's about incentives. A hard ceiling on operations protects whoever already holds position. Airlines with established gates and slots at a constrained airport face less competition than they would at an unconstrained one. Scarcity is uncomfortable for a newcomer and profitable for an incumbent. Nobody has to conspire for that to be true. So the curfew survives on an alignment of interests, not on anyone's belief that it's the ideal policy. The cost of that arrangement shows up somewhere most passengers never look, and it's worth sitting with because it shows how differently the same problem gets solved when the passenger isn't a person. The overnight express industry is built on one specific maneuver: aircraft leaving between roughly midnight and 4 in the morning, converging on a sorting hub, then scattering before dawn. That window is the entire product. Guaranteed morning delivery exists because freight flies while everyone sleeps. San Diego's runway is closed for departures across that entire window. Every hour that overnight logistics depends on is an hour this airport is legally barred from using. So the freight goes north. Cargo moves through San Diego by truck up the interstate to Los Angeles and Ontario, and it flies from there. One assessment after the Miramar vote put roughly 2/3 of San Diego's air cargo as being trucked to those airports. Ontario, in particular, operates around the clock with no curfew at all, about 100 miles up the freeway, which is the whole argument in one image. A box gets driven 100 miles inland so it can take off at 2 in the morning from a runway nobody lives next to. A passenger won't accept that drive, and a resident of Point Loma won't accept the takeoff. So the freight moves and the people stay, and San Diego keeps a downtown airport by permanently exporting an entire industry it has the runway for, but not the hours. Which brings us back to that $3.8 billion. The new terminal is real. More gates, better roadways, a modern building replacing one that opened in 1967. It will make the airport substantially better. What it cannot do is make it bigger in the only dimension that ultimately constrains it, which is time. Every one of those new gates goes dark at 11:30 at night, exactly as the old ones did, under a rule written when the jets outside were still Boeing 727s. San Diego didn't buy a bigger airport. It bought a nicer one, open exactly the same hours it was in 1976. And the strangest part is that the city has reportedly held a way out this entire time. There is land owned by San Diego that could accommodate a second airport. It's leased to the federal government, and the reported price is $1 a year.